Cesar Chavez was born in Yuma, Arizona in 1927 as one of 6 children in a middle-class Mexican-American family. When he was just 10, he watched his family lose their home after his grandma died, which began his animosity for the upper class. He was raised Catholic and attended a Christian school as a child, and he remained devout for his entire life, which played a large role in his beliefs and in his work later on in life. He lived in Arizona for 21 years, until enlisting in the U.S. Navy and being stationed in California. After 2 years, he dropped out and returned to working as a farm worker, but kept living in California. While working with the United Packing House Workers of America, he saw firsthand just how bad the conditions that many workers were subjected to. Because of this mistreatment, he would quit his job there, moving again, this time to Delano, California, and establish the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee. He toured across California with his committee for more than a year, making various public appearances and gaining members and support, then launching a newspaper in 1964 called El Malcriado, which translates to the spoiled. In 1955, Cesar Chavez met Dolores Huerta, who would later help him to found the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee and served as the chief negotiator for 3 years. During these 3 years, she helped him to organize grape and lettuce boycotts that basically forced companies to renegotiate contracts with farm workers. In 1970 alone, these boycotts lost California growing companies more than $2 million. Another important figure in the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee was Gilbert Padilla, who helped to secure government funds for the construction of housing for farm workers and stop the increase of rent prices for housing near the fields that they worked in. The United Farm Workers also drew the attention of important civil rights figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, and Coretta Scott King even visited Cesar Chavez when he was jailed for organizing a strike in Salinas Valley. Boycotts were a constant method of protest for the United Farm Workers, both to show the public what they were fighting for and also just to get media attention so they could expand the movement. Cesar Chavez had also studied Gandhi's nonviolent approaches to protest, so he took a lot of influence from organizations like the SNCC. In 1966, the United Farm Workers began their first boycott, which targeted stores in the United States and in Canada. During this boycott, Cesar Chavez led a march for more than 300 miles, starting in Delano, California, and ending in the Capitol building in Sacramento. This boycott was broadcast on the news and got significant media attention, especially throughout Europe in particular. After the success of their first march and the new supporters that it had brought them, the United Farm Workers began a nationwide boycott of California grapes in 1968. They were demanding that growers improve working conditions because workers would be forced to stand in the sun for hours with barely any water and no bathrooms, and also they increased the pay for all workers because workers were paid very low wages even compared to basically any other job. This boycott lasted for 2 years, but eventually it did achieve the renegotiation of contracts with nearly 150 companies. During their grape strikes, they also focused on the company Teamsters in particular, which was one of the largest growing companies in all of California. Because Teamsters was a large part of the Californian economy, it had the backing of the Californian government and also the local police force, and on December 4th of 1970, Cesar Chavez was arrested for the United Farm Workers strikes and charged with contempt of court. The police told him that he would be released once he called for the end of all active strikes, but he refused and said that he was, quote, spiritually prepared for this confinement. He was released from jail after 3 weeks, and the United Farm Workers were allowed to continue their strikes. In 1971, Teamsters finally signed a contract with the United Farm Workers, which meant the renegotiation of all workers' contracts, and the strikes ended. In 1975, the United Farm Workers boycotts achieved the passage of the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, which guaranteed, quote, justice for all agricultural workers, and granted them the right to form unions for the first time in California's history. Although this did improve the legal rights of farm workers, it's important to acknowledge that it didn't just instantly materialize, and the past difficulties that they had faced even still exist today.